We spent 2 nights trying to come up with the name Open Circle. We were meeting in Jay's basement. There were about 10 of us in the room. And Jay said, we've got to have a name. And it's not going to be Nicollet Avenue Church or something. You know, he said it's got to be something different. And so we had a big easel where we kept writing names up and looking at them and trying to decide what went together and what didn't go together. And we kept coming up with this open circle. But everybody kept saying, but a circle is not open. A circle is always closed. And so we had to think about this a lot, but we thought, but still a circle can be open, we thought. And eventually that's what we all voted for. When we first started meeting, we met in Jay's basement, as I said. And it was just names that he, names like mine that he got from somewhere, knowing that I had belonged to this church at some place. But he wanted it to be more open than that for anybody. And but the people that were meeting were just people that had been members of a Church of the Brethren somewhere. Then we had to spend a lot of time trying to find a place to meet. There was a couple of them that would go and visit storefronts, we were looking for anything that would be a room that would be big enough to meet in. Finally, we heard that the funeral home in Burnsville was for sale. Well, that was a nice big building, and even had little rooms downstairs because it had been built by the Prince of Peace Lutheran Church when they first started in Burnsville. That was to be their church. Well, it grew so fast with Burnsville growing that it was not any time at all, that it was before my time even, that they had to buy more land and build their big church up on the hill. And then that building was taken over by a funeral director. But for some reason he wanted to sell it, and it was for sale. So we looked at it, and it was a little bit more than we wanted to pay or could pay. But we thought, there's lots of room here, we'll be able to do something. And we put money down on it. And I think it was $5,000. That was our earnest money. I was actually the treasurer at the time, so I was the one that wrote the check. And then we got ready Jay, I don't know what he was doing on the side, but he was working. And he had things in the paper, and he was contacting different people, I think, just in the community. So that when we first met at the funeral home, it was probably a Sunday in March. It was before Easter. And I was really impressed when we went that Sunday because there were a lot of people there. Don't know where they all came from. But they were interested, and they joined. The first service we had already hired Todd. Before we could start meeting in the funeral home, Jay had to have a person in charge of music. And he put an ad in a couple papers downtown. And then one day he called me. He said, Faye, he said, we're going to have these auditions at your house because you're the only one that has a piano in the group. So I said, well, okay. So Todd, and there was another person that came. I can still see Todd sitting in, not that chair, it was a different chair that was right there. He sat there and he asked questions, and we asked him questions. We sat here and he played the piano and he sang, and we were all very pleased with him. And he left. And the next week we got a call. He said he wanted to come back. He wanted to talk to us some more. He had some more questions. So we said, well, sure, we'll meet again and we'll talk some more. And he kept asking questions. The question he wanted to ask was, is it going to matter if I'm gay? And, you know, he just couldn't quite say it. He wasn't sure what our reaction would be. Jay by the keyboard and decide what they were going to do. And I said right away to Jay, I told Jay, I said, I want to buy hymnals for the church. My husband, you know, he knew all the old hymns and he liked to sing them, and I thought, and I still had some money. He had died just about 4 months before this. I still had some money left over that people had given me, and I thought, I'm going to buy the hymnals for the church with this and dedicate them to my husband. And Jay said no, he didn't want hymnals. He didn't want a hymnal. He wanted to pick the songs that we were going to sing. And so he said, we'll find something else for you to do with your money if you want to. He said, there'll be some other need that we have that we can use whatever. So that's what we did. So that what I bought was the sign in front of the church. When they were buying the sign, and it was going to cost a couple $1,000s, one of the men said to me, Faye, would you consider doing the sign? I said, well, yes, if we need a sign, that's what we'll do. So every time I drive by it, I think about it. I don't know that anybody else knows that, but maybe this person who is no longer with us, and Jay might know it too, but I'm sure he doesn't think about it. Anyhow.
Who were the early members?
Most of them are gone, and that bothers me a lot. It bothers me a lot, the way we turn over, and we have people that are very interested for 6 months, and then they disappear. And they haven't moved away. And do you know what was his name? Mayer? Joe Mayer. He's still in town. His daughter still comes, except she's the one that's in the Brethren Volunteer Service right now. Steve came, no, he didn't either. Because we were at the funeral home for almost 3 years. And then, well, that wasn't that long, it was 2 maybe. And then we had to find this other building. The funeral home got sold out from under us. Somebody made a much bigger offer, and the guy took it. And it was the thing that you really wanted to take to court, but we didn't have any money or the time to take it to court. So we had to just bite the bullet and go look for something else. They gave our money back. But it was a disappointment in a way, and it would have been a much bigger place, much more friendly place for us, but we found another place. So. And as to other people, I'm trying to think who there were, and they're the people that stayed. Lisa and Sherry. You know who they are.
Yep.
They were there from day one, and but no Brethren background. It was because they were what they were. There is another pair.
How about Mark and Rhonda?
Mark was a member, but he wasn't married yet. And one time, he came, and I think she visited one time. But anyhow, we knew they were getting married. And so, yeah, we were kind of glad when I was sure that he was going to stay here. Because when he first came, and I wasn't sure about, is his job going to last, or what's. But yes, Mark and Rhonda, they were pretty early. Now, there's got to be, well, of course, Rick Gingrich, Rick. Mm-hmm. He was really in before I even knew about it. He was one of the first people I met. And there was another woman that lives way up above Jerry, way above Golden Valley. I think she's in Crystal. Once in a while, Smith. He's black and she's white. Mary Smith and I forget what his name is. They start in the very beginning, and that was another thing. Jay tried to get blacks, I think, some black people. And when we were meeting in the funeral home, we had 3 couples that came regularly. The wife was white and the man was black. And all good people, I would say. The first baby that was born that July was born to one of the mixed couples. And the little boy's name was Spencer, and he was the most beautiful baby with just the perfect black and white mix. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was so pretty. We used to fight about him. She'd bring him to church every morning, and the first person that got closest, they got to hold him. We had more fun with that baby. Anyway, okay.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago.
Anybody here seen my old friend John? Can you tell me where he's gone? He freed a lot of people, but it seemed the good they die young. I just looked around and he's gone.
So that was Sunday afternoon, they brought the body and put it in state in the Capitol. Took it up the steps and had a little service there in the Capitol rotunda. And after that was over, they announced that the rotunda would be open for people to walk through and walk by. And so I remember Jim. Jim was maybe 15, 16 years of age, my oldest one. And he wanted to go. And we kept saying, no, you have to go to school tomorrow. Along about 10 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock maybe, it was announced that there would be no school the next day. So then we had no argument anymore. And so the 6 of us, the little ones too, we got in the car and drove into Washington. And I can say this, we came in East Capitol Street, and we got to a square that was 16 blocks from the Capitol. There was a square. You had to drive around. We got to that square, and there were the people lined up, coming from the Capitol, and they were 5 and 6 abreast, walking on the sidewalk. They were on the sidewalk, walking toward the Capitol. And we knew it was 16 blocks to the Capitol, plus going across the parking area. You just figured there were thousands of people. And we convinced Jim at that point that we are not going to get in that line and walk all that way. Well, I knew we never could with the littler ones. And so we drove on in, looking at all these people. We drove into the parking lot. There was a place where we could pull off the road, and we sat there in the car and watched people walking up the steps to the Capitol, going in. That was something I can just see in my mind yet. And I hope it satisfied Jim too. I mean, I think we were all okay. We went home and went to bed and slept in the next day. I guess the burial was the next day. The next morning, then they took the body down, took it to the big Catholic church not far from the Capitol, and then they walked to the cemetery. And this is interesting because all the years since then, I always wanted to go to that gravesite. I wanted to go up there. I wanted to walk up to that grave. Why? I don't know. But I did, and never got there. And the first year that Nadine took me, and we went back east. Now, I've been back east every year for years, but never went. But when we were going, I said to John, I said, there's the one thing I want to do. I still want to do it. And I want to go to the Kennedy grave. So he said, all right, Mother, we'll get there. So he drove me in town, and Nadine was with us. And then we had to walk quite a ways. There was quite a long walk that we had to walk up to get to this spot from where we could park. And it just about did me in. I almost didn't make it. But I had my cane, and we got there. And I guess I'm satisfied now. Of course, since then, Bobby Kennedy, his grave was added. And just before this time that we were there, Teddy Kennedy's grave was added also. And of course, so it is. But I was glad that I finally had that put to bed. Actually, when Kennedy ran, he was running at first against Humphrey, and we were for Humphrey. So it wasn't like Kennedy was my man or anything, I really, we were pulling for Mr. Humphrey at the time. Don's brother, and this doesn't have to, I'm just talking again. Don's brother that lived in the Washington area, my sister-in-law that was my friend, he worked for Humphrey. He was his foreign affairs advisor. Had Humphrey become president, he might have been Secretary of State, my brother-in-law. And so we were really in Humphrey's camp, I guess.
Good evening. Dr. Martin Luther King, the apostle of nonviolence in the civil rights movement, has been shot to death in Memphis, Tennessee.
Anybody here seen my old friend Martin? Can you tell me where he's gone? He freed a lot of people, but it seemed good they die young. I just look around, he's gone.
I wasn't supposed to go. My husband was supposed to go. I mean, he was the one that he did all the works, and he was the one that would be involved in fair housing and all the other things that we were involved in. And so when we knew about the march, and the march was sponsored by a dozen different groups. Probably 9 out of 10 of them we were members of. So we were getting information about the march. We knew about it long before it happened. But it was always just, in my mind, it was always Don would be the one to go. It was not something you took children to. So one of us couldn't go. And I just never even thought about going.
What year and date was it?
What year? It was the 28th of August in 1963. And the weekend, it was a Wednesday. On that Sunday, we had met some friends, and we were having this picnic in a big park. And my husband was playing ball with the kids, and this family's children also. And he had a bad fall and really tore something in his knee. He went to the doctor, was walking on crutches for several days. Well, we knew right away, you can't go to the March on Washington because you're going to be on your feet for a whole afternoon. So right away he said, you have to go, Faye. And I thought, well, okay. But we knew there were going to be thousands of people. And if you lived in Washington in those days, everybody expected hell to break loose. Everybody expected violence. My friends, said, whoa, I wouldn't be anywhere near Washington that day. So I had to counter these thoughts in my mind. The other thing was, I always hated crowds. I hated to go to a baseball game where suddenly, 50,000 people were leaving at one time. And I thought, I'll never be able to stand being in a group of 300,000 people. Anyhow. But I told myself I had to do it. I was going to do it. Don was counting on me. So the minister from the church was going with us, and 3 other people, and Jim wanted to go. Son Jim wanted to go. He was 15, and we thought, well, he's probably big enough he should go if he really wants to go. So there were 6 of us that went, and my husband drove us in. He was able to drive a car. He drove us into the city as far as we could go until we found places that were cordoned off that you couldn't drive in. And from there, then we had to walk to the monument, the Washington Monument. And I'll never forget the sight as we walked up, and there's this whole huge grassy area just sitting full of people, and more coming all the time. That was another thing that just hit me. As we were driving into Washington, going down the parkway, all of a sudden we came to a spot that there was this huge line of buses full of people. And we couldn't understand why they were pulled off to the side of the road. But we realized soon that the police were stopping them. And then what the police were doing was they would take a whole cordon of buses, maybe 30 of them at a time, right straight through the city, through the red lights. They would change the lights and to get these buses into town as fast and as easily as possible. So we went on in, but then after we're sitting on the monument grounds, down on the mall, and there were roads on the mall, pretty soon in comes a policeman with a cordon with buses behind him. All these buses came in. They all stopped, and the people poured off the buses, at least 30, I would guess. And then here was this just mass of people moving up to the monument grounds. As soon as all the people were off the buses went away. And I understand they were parked in the Pentagon parking lot or at the football parking lot where the football stadium was. There were huge parking lots that weren't being used. That's where they took the buses away. And I will wonder till the day I die is how those people ever found their buses to get back on them again to go home. Because they would bring a load of buses in at a time, a certain... how they had that organized, I can never imagine. So, and it was a hot day. We had very little, you were told to have very little food, but a little bit of water. You should have water, because there was no way that you could buy food anywhere within miles of the place. So I think we had one very light blanket that we put down to sit on. But we basically found a spot, sat down, and didn't move. Again, first we were told to walk from the monument to the Lincoln Memorial. We did that walk behind Martin Luther King. I mean, he started off with his group, and everybody followed down the Constitution Avenue. And then we found a spot to sit and sat. And I've said this many times, I was so impressed with, it was not just Martin Luther King that spoke. We heard sermons, lectures, all afternoon. These different men were called upon to, heads of different groups, the head of, even the things like the United Auto Workers, what was his name? Anyhow, they were white people and black, mostly black people probably. But the one thing that really stood out in all that afternoon of listening was when they had Marian Anderson sing. Marian Anderson was an opera singer, the first black woman to ever be able to sing at the Metropolitan Opera. And beautiful voice. She sang He's Got the Whole World in His Hands. Just verse after verse, you can sing to a song like that. And everybody sang along. It was just the most moving, beautiful thing I'll never forget. Okay. When Martin Luther King died, that was another time too. I remember it was a Friday, I think. Well, no, I'm not sure about that either. But I think it was. I had been to the beauty parlor. Every Friday I had my hair done. And I came home, drove up the driveway, and before I got out of the car, one of the boys came to me and said Martin Luther King had been shot. Well, you just couldn't believe it. But it was true.
Freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring, and when this happens, and when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Anybody here seen my old friend Abraham? Can you tell me where he's gone? He freed a lot of people, but it seemed good they die young. I just looked around.